Hey, welcome back. Today we will finish up the avatar role selection menu. Now I have this thing spec'd out pretty well, so I think we shouldn't run into any big surprises, and we should get this thing wrapped up in this episode so that we can move on to more interesting things. Not that this isn't interesting per se, but it's really just a menu. And you might think that whoop-de-doo, we're finishing a menu. That sounds super simple. But actually, it's not very simple to implement this menu. And I'm going to try to draw this out to you to explain why. So, as with many things in Basis, many things that bring complexity in Basis, it is because we're running on a client-server system. So you have the client here on the left, and this is the thing that captures the input. So we give it input, and it renders things out to the screen. All right. My connection is a little bit slow here, but let's see if this works. And in between these two, we have the network. Let's just make some ominous blob here. And client and server communicates only over the network, essentially. And so we start the game. We launch the server here, and the server is the thing that is essentially authoritative over all the important things in the game. So this is the guy that runs the gameplay code. It's also the guy that runs the scripts. And other important things. What happened to my line? And so the problem is, of course, that we'll have the selection menu here on the client side, right? So when you press down, I've been using the Q key. So let's say that you press the Q key, and this menu here shows up, and you select something. Well, that selection needs to be essentially. That information needs to reach the server. That is vitally important. Otherwise, you'll go out of sync with the server. And when you believe that you're controlling the crane, for example, the server might still think that you're actually in the driver role, or something else, and that would not be great. So we need to sync these things up. And how do we do that? The way I've spec'd this out is that the server handles essentially all of the switching between these roles in this list. Okay, this cursor is really lagging now, so I'm gonna let's just use the mouse instead. I don't know what's up with my remarkable. So the server runs all of the selection logic. The client merely presents this list to the user. And you might be wondering, okay, well, why do we actually need to network this? And the reason, of course, is that if we want to make this game playable as a cooperative thing across the network, then it's really important, because then the whole game essentially runs on the server. Then there's only ever one server. Each player has their own client. The server needs to make these decisions about who is switching to which role, so that everyone is on the same page. So it's not that simple, actually, but it's not super complicated. We have the technology, and I've done similar things with Basis in the past, so I know roughly how I want these things to work. Anyway, let's get to work. I've removed a few things here that we did last time. Because they really wouldn't fly in the system. So basically what we have now is we don't really do anything in-game, right? Don't really do anything here. Or do we do? No, we don't. We only do the thing that we did last time. We have the avatar role selection screen. The avatar role selection screen is initialized here in init. But it doesn't really do anything else. It just initializes itself, and then it sort of sits and waits for the thing to become visible. And excuse me, like I said last time, the visibility we will bind to a property. We have this commented out bind visibility to property thing here, which we can put back in. We don't have this thing currently, but we'll put that in, and maybe we'll start with that. So we go to UI constants, and let me just look at my notes here. We have goofy actions, and we probably want a section here for properties as well, because we'll have probably quite a few of these. So UI property, and then so basically all the actions start with UI action, and then they have some part of this that covers like where are we. So this is like in the game over menu, for example. You have pause menu, you have main menu, blah blah blah. So this would probably be the HUD, the heads up display. And we'll have avatar role selection screen visible. That's one property. Then we want another one which is going to be almost the same, but it's not visible, it is index. So that's another property that we will want to track. And here we can just call this like HUD avatar role. Well, we can really just call it this, right? Visible, and then that would be index, like so. So now we have this correct name here, and from the code we can just refer to this guy. Make sure we get the auto completion in our code editor. Now this thing obviously can't refer to that because it's not Zig code, so we need to bind to the actual string name. And I think this is the only thing that we really need to do to this avatar role selection screen in the script. So if this was like a built-in widget in Goofy, then we could bind the selection index to this guy, but it's not. we don't have anything to bind to here in the script, so we bind to the visibility because this supports visibility and doesn't know what the selection screen index is, so we'll have to refer to that in code. Right, okay. Now then, what is the next step? Let me just have a look at my notes again here. Right, so we need the input. Previously, we briefly tested out the visibility system on the visibility binding using so-called raw input. So raw input is a very easy way to just get messages somewhere in your client code whenever someone uses the mouse or the keyboard. It doesn't support any gamepads. The input can't be rebound, and it also only works locally on the client. So not really usable for any game input like this. And remember from our sketch here, we really want the server to be the one who actually makes the change when you move like one up or down in the menu. So it needs to be sent over the network, because of course your key presses originate on the client. The client is the one that reads your keyboard or your gamepad. Alright, so the way we do this is by using game input. And game input works very differently from raw input. So in game input you have contexts, general in-game controls, debug in-game controls, free camera controls. Whoa, I'm not gonna modify that. We have vehicle driving controls, vehicle driving development controls, and character controls. Some of these don't really make sense for this game. This is just sort of it's a list I came up with at some point. The idea with contexts is that you can just disable or enable or override which contexts are available at some point. So for example, free camera controls can be bound to the same buttons on your keyboard as vehicle driving controls, for example. But if the free camera control context is not enabled, then they won't interfere. So that's quite handy. And maybe we would actually want to have a separate context for this thing in the future, this menu, and we would only enable that input context when the menu is shown. Although then we couldn't actually have the button that shows it be part of that context because it would sort of depend on itself. Anyway, we're not going to do that now, but we might want to do that at some point when we have this thing more figured out. Right, I see here that we have a toggle trailer connection. I'm just going to comment that out. We're not using that in means currently. And I will add some new IDs here. Right, so these were the context IDs, and then we have the input IDs, and these are something. You can come up with whatever you want for your input ID. I'm going to come up with a couple of new things here. So we have vehicle in-game menu, I think, because we can then use the same input ID for other menus if we have any other menus. So in-game menu up, vehicle in-game menu down, and then we need to have something. So these are actions, right? When you click a button and you press a button or you press a key on the keyboard, they will fire. And if you keep it pressed, nothing will happen. We just fire once. That's an action. And the down is also an action. Then we have something called a state, because when we in my prototype here, when we hold down the Q key, the menu should be shown on the screen, and it should be shown as long as you keep the Q key down. So to be able to do that, we need something called a state, not an action, but a state. But it's still done completely similarly here in the list of input IDs. So show avatar screen. This is more specific than these guys. These guys could just be up or down for any screen. I seem to be having something of a cough going. But yes, this show avatar screen is then more specific. It shows this particular menu for us. Let's have a look at my notes again. Okay, so we commented that thing out, so we should find it here at some point. And we can just comment this out as well. Right, so when you have defined your input IDs, you need to add them here to this. This technically goes into an input buffer on the C++ side. But we call it add input, and we go input ID and vehicle in game menu up was first, right? Yes, first up and then down. And this is where we give the type. So basis input type, and up and down, as I said, these are actions. We can do the down as well. And then we have the third thing, which was the avatar, show avatar screen. This is not an action, this is a state. So now we can query for these things. We can query, is this input action enabled? And that means that this frame, someone pushed down the button and then the next frame, even though the button is held down, we won't get this again, because it really only registers for the pushing down of the button. With a state, it returns true as long as the button is held down, essentially. I think some systems refer to actions as buffered input and state as unbuffered input. Unbuffered is just sort of like, is button down, yes, no. And actions take a little more effort to detect, because it needs to sort of figure out, was it pressed down last state? No. Is it pressed down now? Yes. Then it fires. Okay, and then finally we need to map these things. So there are quite a few steps here. And there is this function set input mappings. This is where we would actually map the inputs if we had like a menu in the game where you could remap your keys. That menu would produce something that we can then call here using all of these helper functions. You can call this map input, which is the raw one, or you can just call like map game button input, for example, if you only want buttons. Helps you out a bit more. And as you remember, we commented out the toggle trailer connection, so let's do the same here. We don't have that. And right, so now we need to map these, and we should map both the keyboard and the gamepad. So do game map gamepad button input, yes. Then we can do input ID and vehicle game menu up. And what button should it be? Well, it should probably be basis input gamepad button D-pad up, maybe. Do we have anything? Oh, we have something mapped to reset. Let's make that like Y. So I'm using Xbox controller terminology here, and here is where the context comes in. So I was thinking, right now we could just map it to the driving controls, and that's why I needed to actually reassign this button, the reset, which I don't think is actually used in means, but whatever, because it's also using it was also using D-pad up in the same context, so then you get a conflict if you try to do that. Right, so we map game button input to this input ID with this game button when this context is enabled. All right. I hope that makes it clear what we're doing. So now we want to map keyboard, and we want to map keyboard to the same input ID. So vehicle, I'm just going to call menu up, and then we have basis input key code, maybe, and then key up, like that, and we want the same context, like so. So now we have this up mapped, and it will work with both keyboard and gamepad. And now then we do the same thing for down, and this would be down, and this would also be down, and yeah, then we have the avatar show avatar screen, which is a state. And what do we map that to? We can probably copy this because most of it will be the same. But we have it's show avatar screen, and this would be still like right bumper or something like that. Is that good? I think that's probably good. And then we can use the Q key, which we read from the raw input previously, and now we're reading it properly, so to speak. And yes, perhaps the most important thing with this system now is that we can actually read these on the server. So when we have this vehicle avatar component, because this is an avatar tracking component, which we can see here, avatar tracking component. When this is an avatar of some player, we can read its input. The avatar tracking component provides a way to do that. For example, here we can just call self get context get input action. Here we have an input ID toggle CC. If we go, so that's cruise control. We go to the very same list where we just were. You can see toggle CC is here as well. So this is how we're reading an action. This only works if you are an avatar of somebody. So you can read it on the client or you can read it on the server, but you need to be someone's avatar. Any old game object can't read a certain player's input. That really doesn't make sense. I mean, it might be considered a security risk, I guess, but I also don't really know how that would be mapped. So that's not allowed. But any object any component which belongs to the object which currently is the avatar of a player can read that player's input, whether that is on the client or the server. The input is sort of semi-reliable. It's not necessarily it's not a 100% reliable connection for the input, but it's a best effort. I think it tries like 3 times to send the input, and then if it still hasn't arrived, it just gives up. Because with input, it's like it is really bad if an input is lost on the way, but it's arguably even worse if the input is slow. So we're just sending it sort of 3 times, and then it can figure out if it has lost a frame of input or not, and it has a couple of extra tries to get that input. So it should be mostly reliable. Okay, so now we have the input sorted. Now we should be able to actually, first of all, we should be able to build this. Let's do that. Let's drink some coffee while we're doing it. Good, so that succeeded. And we can even, maybe I should even do the debug test, which does the full analysis of all the Zig code. Also succeeded, good. Okay, so what is the next step then? Well, the next step is probably to initialize these properties that we created. We did this already in the previous episode. I think we just used a straight up string here, but now we're going to use those UI constant names that we set up previously. So means, well, yeah, this will be a boolean, and we have UI constants, and this is the avatar role selection screen visible. Initial value is false. Initially, it is not visible. Right, and then we have another one, and this is the index, so it will be a 32-bit integer, and it means UI constants, not that, but index, yes, that one. And initial value for this, I think I will set to -1, so that it just sort of signifies that it's not set to anything. And that should be it, I think, on the UI manager side. And then we will go to the meat of the thing. So the vehicle avatar component. And this guy, first of all, this guy needs some way to use Goofy, because it will need to actually set those properties. So we import Goofy, and then we will go all the way down here. We can put in a separator, a horizontal ruler, if you will, and we will create a new type. I'm not sure if this really should go in this file or not, but let's put it here for now, because this avatar or vehicle avatar component is the only thing that will use this new thing. And the new thing will be called avatar role tracker, and it is a struct. And we do the normal thing which we do with structs. We assign this to self, and this will also have a context which will also be of avatar tracking component type. Not context, like so. And this needs to keep track of a few things. So it needs to keep track of the index that the selected index, or no, it needs to keep track of the active index. So this is the active index in this list of roles that we set up here previously, role list in the properties for vehicle avatar component. So this is the stuff that we read from data, from JSON. We have a list of roles, and we need to keep track of the active index. So index 0 would be the driver, for example. Index 1 might be the cargo crane, if we have a cargo crane active, etc., etc. Then we need to keep track of another index, and that would be like highlighted index. So that is the item in the UI which is currently highlighted. We need to keep track of that, and that also needs to be synchronized across the network, at least in this version. And then finally, we need to track if the menu is visible or not. We need to track all of those things, and they also need to be propagated over the network. So how do we propagate something over the network? Well, we create active role index, and we use propagated value, and it's a handle to a propagated value, and the type of the propagated value is int32. And then we do highlighted role index, and that's the second one, which is of the same type. And I will explain propagated values in a second. So role menu visible, I guess, which is also a propagated value. So this is a handle to a propagated value, and it is of type bool. Those three. And we also need to keep track of how many roles we have for a certain vehicle. And I don't think that needs to be propagated, because the client and the server, they both get this same object with the same list. So this can just be roll count. And you might be wondering, why am I not doing this now? Why am I not following the Zig naming conventions? I decided last night, actually, while I was figuring things out, and I'm not gonna bother with that. I do use it in some module naming. The components I typically keep as they are, because I've gotten used to the idea that a component lives in a file with the same name as the components. But for other modules, I'm going to use this naming convention. But I think I'm going to stick with this kind of naming for variables. It's just what I'm used to. So yeah, it is what it is. Okay. Yeah, I think that's what we need right now, and we will need some kind of init function, which is almost kind of like the the constructor for this, if you will, and we take the avatar tracking component as a parameter, and we return a self, so we return an object of this very same type, and we just set context to context. And now we need to initialize. We can remove all of those because we have them there in their final form. So we need to initialize active role index somehow. So what is this now? What is this propagated value? Well, a propagated value is a wrapper around a data type. Not all data types are supported, but you can do the normal ones. So integers, floats, colors, vectors, quaternions. We can actually probably see the type here. So these are the types that are supported on the C++ side. You can even do strings actually. You can do colors actually, but you can do color with the vector 4. And I think some of those are actually, actually I don't have these. Well, there's color. That's confusing. I wonder why I have listed color here if it's not supported on the C++ side. But anyway, so these data types are supported, and the idea is that when you change a value on the server, it will propagate to all the clients. You can make a component owned by the client, as it's called, and in that case, it goes the other way around. So the client is the one that sort of dictates what those values will be, and the server then listens to the client and once again propagates to all the other clients. But that's almost never used, and it's not used in means, and I don't think it's used in slide either, actually. So good rule of thumb is that a propagated value, the data flows from the server to the client. And you can actually only use these in components because you actually need a context like this to initialize them. So active role index, we initialize this, and it's a propagated value handle, but now we will actually use a propagated value of the same type, and we call init, and we give the context, which is just called context. We give the name, which needs to be unique within the component. We can just give the same name. Reliable propagation is yes, that is, we do want this to be reliable, and this is actually reliable. It's not like the input, which is mostly reliable. Immediate false. We don't need this. It's very little data and it won't cause any congestion, but it doesn't need to be immediate. So propagated values that aren't set to be immediate, they get sort of sent via a priority, in priority order, essentially. We haven't really set any priority for this, so it will get sent along with most of the other things. But you can also set it to immediate if you need it to be like super like transforms, for example, are set to unreliable but immediate, because you typically just update them all the time. Okay, and then the initial value is 0, I guess. That kind of makes sense. And then we have the highlighted index, which is essentially exactly the same. We just give it a different name. And, it's supposed to be a comma. And then the role menu visible. And this is kind of the same, except it is a bool. And thus the initial value will be false, right? Right, so how can we create these here if we can only create them in a component? Well, because we give the context of the component to the init. So essentially this guy can now only live somewhere where it has access to this component context. So that's good. Okay, and then we need pub fn dinit, and this is self, and void. So this is essentially like the destructor. And here we want to de-init all of these guys. And this is very important so that it sort of unhooks itself. It does actually a cleanup if you don't do that, but it is good to do it regardless because then it is sort of deterministic how it actually does the cleanup. Okay. Cool. So now we have the beginning of something here which will sort of keep track of these things for us, so that we don't need to like sprinkle this tracking code all over the place in the component itself, because it can get kind of nasty. So how do we use this then? We haven't initialized or deinitialized it yet. We haven't even added one of these as a member, but we'll get to that in a second. Let's just keep going. So whenever something becomes the avatar, we need to let this thing know a few things. At least we need to tell it how many roles we have. So let's do became avatar, and we have role count, which is I32. And we can do self dot roll count equals roll count, and I think here we should probably also, like, this will get fired when something becomes an avatar. So I think it's reasonable to set the index to driver, so the 0th element essentially. Self highlighted. So yeah, propagator value it has a set and a get. You can get the value out of it, and you can set it. You can set a value changed callback, which we will probably do in a bit. And when you call set on something, it actually propagates it across the network. Right. So this is sort of a resetting function. And then we probably need to have something which ticks it, which is where we will read the input. So we can just add it here. Do that, and then just write to do read input here. And we can just read the input because we are doing it through this context. So even though we're not in the component, we can almost act as if we were in the component, which is kind of nice actually. I think these are the only public methods we need. Yeah, we might have actually one more, because we need to hook up. Yeah, let me just, I think we will need this. I've done this enough times that I know that I think I will need a post in it. And in the post init, we will hook up value changed callbacks for these guys. We could, in theory, I guess, do it here, but I think it's cleaner to do it this way. You'll see in a bit what I mean. Okay, so let's try this. Let's add one of these guys to the component. So. What did my notes say? They don't say a lot actually on the matter. Let's just go up here and we'll add one. Not there actually. Just put it here as the last one. So avatar role tracker and avatar role tracker. And since we don't initialize it here, we need to initialize it here instead, but this is the correct place to do it. So let's do avatar role tracker init, and we need to give it the context, which we do. We just give it context like this. And yeah, this is why we have the create function, because this init is really just like fill in all of the fields with the information because SIG wants everything to be initialized. I mean, you can set it to undefined, but that hardly helps if you actually want to use something. But you can't really run any logic here inside. I mean, you can run logic here before this self thingy, like this, blah, blah, blah. But if you want to run logic that actually sort of depends on other things in the component, you sort of have to do it in a separate function. So that's why we have create. And in create, we can call self avatar role tracker post in it, like so. And then in destroy, we will do self avatar role tracker d in it. And so that's sort of the lifetime of it. And then we will most likely want to tick it. So let's tick it here. What was my plan for ticking? What's my plan for ticking? Did I have a plan for ticking? I don't think I have a plan for any specific ticking. So let's just tick it there. Boom. So yeah, just as a small reminder, we have update and we have pre-tick and we have tick, and update runs every update, so every variable frame. Pre-tick and tick runs every fixed frame, every fixed update. Pre-tick runs before the physics and tick runs after the physics. And tick is sort of usually the place where you want to put things. Pre-tick only if you really need to do something before the physics have stepped. Okay. And so here we have on became client local avatar. This is where we added this list to the things. We send the message with params, which initializes the screen on the UI in-game UI view model from last time. Or was it two episodes ago? I don't remember, but recently anyway. So this is one place where we could really well do the became avatar. We need self, obviously. We need avatar role tracker became avatar, and role count is now this BPP roles len. And we actually need the int cast there as well, because that is a U size, as we can see, and we want it as an int32, so we just wrap it in an int cast, and that should be that. So that's really good. But this only happens on the client, of course, because its name is on became client local avatar. There's also a method here called on became server avatar, which also takes self, and it also takes host ID, which we don't need, but it gives it to us, and it is really important in certain things, certain situations. It's a void function. Let's not forget that. And we can do essentially the same thing as we do here, but we only need to call the became avatar thingy. And you might ask, how do I know that you can do this? Well, I just happen to know it, but you can actually, if you look at component factory, I think this is it is that one, but I think there was a place somewhere which listed the actual. And the following functions are forwarded to individual components. Oh yes, I mean this function is always called for all the components, even if they don't have an on became avatar function. Then it has this if has decl check here, and if it has such a thing, then it will call it. So that's sort of the way that SIG does conditional compilation. But yeah, you can just see that we have all kinds of things here that gets called on the components. Documentation obviously is a bit lacking still for the basis engine. You have create, on object created, we've seen some of these. On message received, we've seen as well. And here is on became client local avatar. And here we can see on became server avatar, it passes in the host ID, that's why we need it there as well. So, when this becomes an avatar on the client, and specifically the local avatar, then we do this. We have done this always. We set the camera mode for the vehicle. I don't think Means actually uses this, but it's been there since forever. We check if we have blueprint properties. We collect the roles into this message params, and we send it here. But now we also notify this avatar role tracker that, hey, we became the avatar, and we have this many roles. We also now do the same on the server when this becomes an avatar of someone. Like the server obviously doesn't have a local avatar of anyone. The client has a local avatar. If you have two players, then one of those players will be the local player for that client. The server doesn't have any local players, it just has a list of players. That's also why you get this host ID, so that you can identify who became the avatar for which player. Anyway, my point is that we now call this on both client and server when this guy becomes an avatar of someone. That is important. What then? Note checking time again. Note checking time. Right. Yeah, so we do the, let's have a look here. We do the init, we do the post init, and we do the d init. That's good. Then we do the ticking over there, and we call became avatar and became avatar. Yeah, I think that's probably all we need right now. Still not really doing much. You may notice. Like the whole idea of this avatar tracker is that we can send those goofy properties. Now if we run this, we should be able to run this, I think. Let's try to build it. We can't actually. What? Missing struct field role count. Oh, we probably just need to set it to 0, right? What? Did you not hear me when I wanted to rebuild you? Right, now it probably works. It takes long enough that it probably works. Yeah, these don't concern us. Okay, so now it succeeded, and now if we run this, do we have the C++ side built? Yes, we do. Now if we run this, it probably won't do anything. So if we press Q now, nothing happens. And that makes perfect sense because we don't actually read that thing. So now we need to read the input here. And we want to do it on the server. I think we want to do it only on the server. And then we just propagate the information back to the clients. So looking at this guy again. Oh, I don't have it active. Now we can just look at it like this. Read the thing here, propagate it back to the client so that the client can show the correct menu with the correct selection and everything. Obviously, if we look at the whole chain, like the input arrives here, the client sends the input to the server. That's done automatically for us now that we use the game input system. We don't need to really worry about that. Then the logic runs here, which checks the input, sets those propagated values, they flow back here. The client can set those goofy properties which make the UI render itself correctly. That sounds like a plan. Let's do that. So if self context on server, is it? It's one of these things where IntelliSense just mysteriously stops working, but I don't care. So show menu. This is the first thing we need to check. Are we actually showing the thing? Because if we're not, then nothing matters really. Well, now it works again. It's weird. Like sometimes inside of these parentheses, like IntelliSense just doesn't want to be nice. So get input, and this is state, and we do means input ID show avatar screen. Right. So there's the one that we added here. That one. We are basically asking, is someone now holding down the Q button, essentially, right? And, right, we kind of need to buffer it ourselves, but we can't use an action because we need to react to both pressed and released, something that the game input system doesn't do for us currently. So we can do something like this. We can do was menu shown previously, and we just check the role menu visible propagated value. So you can use those propagated values as normal variables, member variables really. That's fine, and I think this get just gets the where's get? Yeah, here's get. It just gets the thing out of the propagated value. Right? So if we have a change in this, essentially, so if show menu is not was menu shown, again, IntelliSense, what the hell, then self role menu visible is set, and we can do show menu, right? So we're reading, is it pressed now? And then we're checking, was it pressed before? If it either was pressed or was released, then we set role menu visible to whatever it is right now. So this essentially means that if we hook up like a value change callback to this role menu visible, it will fire whenever someone presses or releases the button, which is exactly what we want. And then we want a couple of other things. So we want if the menu is currently shown, and self context get input state means input ID, and it was what was it called, something up, vehicle in-game menu up, and yeah, then we want to do something. We want to do like move up. Let's put here like move up in the menu, and the same thing, move down. Move down, right? So if the menu is currently being shown and someone is pressing menu up, then move up. Otherwise, move down, etc., etc. Right? That should be, and this should actually be kind of easy to do if we think about it. So we need like something like a new index is self, and we use the highlighted role index because that is what is moving around in the menu. So we get the value out of there, and we subtract 1 from it. This now becomes an int 32 because this is an int 32. You can see here propagated value handle of int 32. We minus 1 from there. So we need to make sure that like if new index is larger than or equal to 0, then we will update that value, right? New index here. So 0 is the first item in that list, and then it progresses downwards. So if we're moving up, we need to check that we don't go into negative territory. If that is the case, then we just don't do anything. If we're still non-negative, then we update that highlighted role index. Cool. Move down is the other way essentially, and here we need to make sure that we are we're in range of the role count, right? So that we don't go off the list in the other direction, and then we update the highlighted role index. So that's good. So now we have two of these things, two of these propagated values that we can hook change handlers to. One is the visibility and one is the highlighted role. And those are the exact places where we want to actually set those goofy properties. So that should be really good. Right. Actually, one more thing. If we're not showing the menu anymore, so if the showing changed, which is this if here, and if we're not showing the menu anymore, which means that it has closed, then we want to actually set the active role index to the highlighted role index. Right? Like that. So that should allow us to like browse around in the menu, move up and down, and when you let go of the Q button or the, what was it, right bumper, the highlighted item becomes the new selected item, which is what the original plan called for. So that handles that. Okay, now we're updating all three of those, which is good. Okay, so now then let's go to post init and hook up those value change callbacks. I think after that we're pretty much done with this, unless I'm missing something. So role menu visible, we can do set value changed callback, and the callback is a propagated value, and this is a bool, right? Callback and init, and we can init it as just a function, or we can init it as a method. We don't really need it as a method here, but let's do it anyway because we might want that later. So method just lets us tell which, and that's supposed to be self with a small s, and that's supposed to be self with a large s. Yeah, because the first one is the receiver and the second one is the receiver type, and the third one is the name of the method. So we need to create a method here, and we can call it something like on menu visibility changed, right? And we'll want to do this only on the client. So on client, something like that. We want to do this only on the client because it doesn't make any sense to try to poke at Goofy from the server. In fact, it might be kind of dangerous if we're doing that on the local server, the one that runs when you're playing single player, because server typically runs on another thread, so Goofy is not thread safe like that. So if we are on the client, we hook these up. If we're not, we don't do that. And it probably wants one more of these. It does, and it probably says that we don't have anything like that, and we don't, but we will make it. So let's create a function here, and the function for these changed callbacks look a little like this. So first, this is a method because we wanted it to be a method, so we put in the self there. We don't, even though it doesn't really need to be that. And then we have the actual value. So this would be like visible in this case, and it's a boolean. And then we have two more parameters that I maybe should make optional, but currently all propagated value change handlers need to have these. So we have local change. That basically means if someone on the client set it to true, then local change will be true. If someone on the server or on another client set it to true, then local change will be false. Like got propagated over the network. And then value time is the last one. It is an F64 actually, and it basically tells you the absolute time when that value was set. These are typically not used, which is why I might just at some point make them optional. But so now we need to set the property value here, and the visibility was a bool, and we have means UI constants visible, like so. And we can just plug in the visibile. Visible. There we go. Right, so that's one. And then we have the other one, which is the highlighted index changed, right? So on highlighted role index changed. And in this case, this would be an I32, and it's an index. Set it like there, we set it there, and it's called something index. UI property HUD avatar role selection screen index. That's a mouthful. And then we need to hook this up as well. So do a little bit of copy paste magic here, and we'll set that to that, and we'll set that to that. And that should be it, I think. Yeah. And now we could maybe, I mean, we can set these properties. Nothing is listening for them yet, but we can do print and print F. I don't know why it's giving me print. It's print F, isn't it? Yes. Yes, it is. So visible and something like this, and then we can do visible, and here we can do index, and this might now require me to put in some specifier here for the printf. No, actually it doesn't. I often don't remember how those work. Let's see what this gives us. So that should now, the UI is still, well, it probably actually will show up the canvas. It won't have anything sensible, won't contain anything sensible yet, but we are actually kind of close to having that work. But we should pay extra attention to this debug output thingy. So if I set this to, oh, I forgot a new line there. Yeah, that was stupid. But now if I press Q, oh, hey, input type state. All right, we're doing something bad. We're doing something bad. What? Map? Oh, right. We're probably reading it on the server. So here we go. Server thread get state. Right. Yeah, that's not a state. We need to give it an action. Like so. Yeah. Actually, we can do this, I guess. Yeah, hello. Will you please finish so that we can rebuild you again with the proper fixes? Yes, so these are actions. This is a state, right? And yeah, I think this should work now. So became avatar sets it to 0, which would mean that this would fire, which is why we're seeing those index 0 there almost immediately. So let's see now. Set index 0, 1 for client, 1 for the server, right? Okay, and then I'm pressing Q now. And you get visible true, yay! And then I can go down and the index is 1, and if I keep going, nothing happens. And then I can go back up and index is 0. Yes. Excellent. So this is working exactly how I imagined. So if we set avatar, I press, we only have the driver here. We can't go either up or down because it only has the driver. You can see the visibility going there in the console. Cool, so this works. This works. Excellent. Now what we need to do is just make a few small changes in the UI avatar role selection screen. So here we're currently just we're printing out the roles that we get here, add role. But we're not reading the highlighted index anywhere. And so let's do that. So let's do highlighted index, and we can just read it straight from the Goofy manager because it's a property. So get property type, and that would be an i32, and the name i32. So, and the name is means.ui constants, right? And then we have index, we have that one. Yep, that's good. And what should we do here? What should we do? Let's make this a little bit fancy. Let's make that like orange. And then we can maybe put in like a headline here and call this like roles or something. And I think those are a bit close to the corner. Let's try something like that so it's aligned with this one, which is also sitting at 20. Okay, and now we need to not just iterate over the roles in the slice, we also need the index so that we can actually see if it is the highlighted index. So we start iterating from 0 and we give it an I, which is the iterator or the, I don't know, accumulator, whatever it's called. And we check if highlighted index equals I. Then we do some things. And what we do is we will just render a background slightly differently. So here we'll set this to white again, right? So that we have the text color is white, but the background color should be something else. And what should it be? It should be probably, I don't know, some semi-transparent gray or something. I mean, the background is almost see-through, but it is also black. So let's make this a little less see-through and a little less black and see how that looks. Yeah, and what we want to do is Goofy. We want to do essentially the same thing we do here. Begin path, set field color, then we do not necessarily around. Let's do just a normal rect. So NVG begin path context like so. Begin path, then we set field color, then we do Goofy. I think it's just rect. Yes, it is. Context, and X would be like pixel post.x because we want it to cover the entire width of the thing. So text Y, let's move it like 5 pixels up, and pixel size.x to get the full width, and then so that moves like 20. No, it moves, sorry, 30. So 30. Let's do that. Right? Would that look good? I don't know. Let's see. it might. And then we need to fill. We need to call fill to fill in that the background. And then we set the color to white again because we will be drawing the text which we want in white. I think. I don't know how that will look. Maybe we should actually, because we're not drawing rounded rectangles here, move that down to 50. And what is the problem? Oh, I think it's called, is it RGBA? Yes, RGBA. If you're giving the alpha as well. And I guess technically that should be like that, but for some reason the formatting doesn't really want to be my friend right now. Let's try this. Let's run it and see what happens. Hey, would you look at that? So we have two rows. I can press this. I'm pressing it down, and I'm pressing up, and I'm pressing down, and I'm pressing more down, and nothing happens. I'm pressing up, and nothing happens. We can switch between those two. Now if I let go, and now go back, it has to stay there. Very cool. Now if I set this to cargo crane, obviously nothing happens in the game yet, but maybe we can make something happen. If we go to this vehicle, it only has the driver role, because it's set in the data to not have anything else. If we go back to this, now it's set to driver again, and this is the thing with like the became avatar thingy, where it sets it back to 0, and that's what we were thinking about earlier. Let's just as a fun little test, let's set that to a tractor crane. Maybe we can draw something with that position to make sure it actually does sort of kind of work. And let's make that like -3, 2, and +10, something like that. I think that should be fine. And now if we go back to the game, we should see the whole list of 3 things. Hey. Okay, let's do one more thing in this little episode. And first of all, let's see if it works with the gamepad, which it does. I know I can't really show you, but you're just gonna have to trust me that I'm using the gamepad. And actually, my bumper key is kind of broken on this, so I should maybe just switch out. But I really like this Xbox 360 controller, so it's kind of saddens me that it's breaking apart. But yeah, it's I have to press it kind of hard to work, but it does work. So that's nice. But yeah, let's do one more thing. Let's use the position that we can read out of the active role and do something with it. Draw like a debug drawing thing, and that's something that we would like to do only on the client and probably here in update, right? So if self context on client, then now we can read out the active role index out of our avatar role tracker. Active role index is right there, and just get it out of there. So that's a propagated value, but you can just you don't have to have the callbacks. You can just read it straight out of there, and it will give you the propagated value. So if this thing active role index is not -1, then we want to give, or we want to get the blueprint property of that index, right? So we want to do if self blueprint properties. We need to do it with a separate if here, and we need to capture it because this is an optional pointer. You can see the question mark there. I can't move them. Oh, I can actually move the mouse there. Question mark pointer. So we need to check if it exists. And then out of this we can do active role would be BPP. It's called roles. Yes, it is. And get, and that's a U size, and that will be the active role index will be an I32. So we need to do int cast active role index. That gives us the active role, and out of the active role we can get the local position of the active role. What's it called? Was it position? I think it was position. Let's see. Active role is there. I mean, we have that thing in this same file. So it's one of these guys. It has the type and it has the position, which is a vec3. Yeah. Okay. But that's in local space. So we need to transform it into the world space. So let's get the world matrix is self context transform get world matrix, and then we can do world position is world matrix, and it's called transform point local position. And then we can do like a debug sphere or something. Debug draw sphere, be world position radius. Let's make it big enough because the driver position will be at 0, 0, 0 local space, so it's like right in the middle of the vehicle. So let's make it like 5 or something. And what do we make the? Maybe white. White should be visible on top of our blue vehicle. So let's just review what we did. If we are on the client and we have an active role index and we have blueprint properties, then we get the active role for that and the local position out of that, which we convert into world position using the world matrix, and then we draw a sphere at that place. So everything should be just now immediately should be spheres around everything. Look at that. So obviously these guys just have the one the one role, the driver role, and they will be just centered around that. And the driver is also, it's just in the middle of the vehicle, which is right there. But now if we change this to the cargo crane, haha, look at that. A tractor crane. And cargo crane is perhaps roughly where the crane will be. I don't know if it will be on the left or the right side. The tractor crane was the other position that we just put in the data. And it could be maybe there, and then driver is back there. Hey, so pretty cool. This works. And this is now fully networked. We can do this even if the server is running on someone else's machine on the other side of the planet. Everything will be synchronized. You can sort of feel that it's even with this it's not immediate. There's a little bit of lag there. Maybe we can do something about that. Perhaps with the immediate propagation or something. It's very little data anyway, so it doesn't quite matter. But hey, we have this thing finally set up, and now we can start using it. Now, of course, if you do this, and now you go to cargo crane, you shouldn't be able to just drive around anymore like this. We need to do more things and limit what you can do and enable other things when you switch roles. But this is pretty good that we have it working this well, because this is now, I would consider this to be robust enough to be perhaps even used in the shipping game. And we can now we have it nice and data driven, so we can add more roles. We can enable and disable roles for different vehicles, and maybe we even need some system at some point that would allow us to like disable certain roles if certain conditions aren't met. Like you can, for example, perhaps imagine that the player doesn't have the cargo crane at the very beginning of the game, so this thing wouldn't be here. But those are all just small improvements to be made. And yeah, this is nice. And it's all written in Zig for once. I mean, a lot of the work that went into creating this little innocent looking menu is just, or it has been just me exposing things to Zig, some of which I've done off camera. That's kind of nice. Now it's just all in Zig, and everything is nice and moddable. Cool. Okay. That's an episode right there. Next time we will probably do something else, but related. So of course the idea is to get working on the crane. Maybe we'll switch gears a little bit and actually start thinking about how to like implement the crane itself. And then when we have something working on the crane side of things, we start to think about how to actually combine that with this avatar role. Because like there's obviously a lot of complexity involved in just how do we make the crane work, how is it built on the physics side, etc., etc. Many questions to answer there as well. Okay, cool. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any suggestions, let me know as well. And I'll see you next time. Bye.